just going to be very brief.
Okay,
so this we're a first Shlema for Yankel Benish Ben Frida, Michal Bet Meira, and all Cholim of Klein Israel. Speedy refer Shlema for all.
Amen.
Okay, so something interesting from Parshat Ki Tzeitzei. It's a lot of halachot, and yeah, so interesting thing here. It says here, if a man divorces his wife, he can remarry her, but he's not allowed to remarry her if she's had a relationship or was married to someone subsequent to the divorce. If she divorces the guy after he married her, like her second divorce, he's not allowed to take her back because it relates to the physical relationship. So it doesn't say anything about if the man does it. If the man gets divorced, then remarries, and then the first wife is in limbo, never gets remarried, but he wants to remarry her, I think he can actually marry her. So this is just some of the halachas, the interesting halachas, that are written in Ki Tzeitzei. Why it says that, I don't know. I looked to see. There's nothing written as in no footnotes or commentary regarding that, but that's because it says here to do so if the woman he divorced remarries and then divorces and he wants to marry her again. It says here, to do so would be repulsive to Hashem, and you must not bring immorality to the land that Hashem your God is giving you as a heritage. Now, anyway, that's what it says, and that's the way it is.
Okay. All right. So, all right. Let's just go to the Gemara, and I just want to clarify what we did yesterday because we had a million disturbances, and with Hashem's help, hopefully this year will go well. Well, with Hashem's help, it always goes well. It's when I'm on my own. Okay. So what we are learning in here is that we're dealing with the part of the Mishnah that states if the robber gave the money to the men of Yohayariv and the Asham offering to the Mishmar of Yedayah, he has discharged his obligation. Why? Because Yohayariv is the family of Kohanim that run the Mishmar the week before the family of Yedayah. Okay? So if you give the principal before you give the Asham for the false oath, you've discharged your obligation because the robber has done it in the correct order. If, however, he gave the Asham offering first to Yohayariv and the money for the principal a week after to Yedayah, the law is as follows. If the Asham offering is still extant, in other words, they haven't sacrificed yet, and they kept it for that week, and they hadn't gotten round to it, then the members of Yedayah shall offer it. But if not, the robbers must repeat and bring another Asham offering. So what it's saying is that according to this particular opinion, the principal, it would seem, goes to where the Asham is and not the Asham to the principal. This is opinion of the debate between Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis. So all we are saying is that when the robber gives the Asham to Yohayariv during its watch and then made restitution to Yedayah the following week during its watch, it's accepted. But if it's in the wrong order, we force the previous Mishmar men of Yohayariv to give the Asham to the following week's Mishmar for the principal and the Ashram to be given together. Now, you might say that there are one or two ways to do it. Now, one of the ways to do it is you could say maybe that the Asham should follow the principal instead of the principal following the Asham. So we're going to see the respective opinions now. So we want to know where we get this from. So the rabbis taught in a brisa, if the robbers gave the asham to the mishmar of Yohayarev and the money for restitution to the mishmar of Yedaya, the money reverts to the place where the asham is. That's according to Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, Yedaya must release the money to Yohayarev. Okay? And those are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. But the sages say the asham reverts to the place where the money is. In other words, Yohayarev must release the offering to Yedaya. So we wanted to see the case under discussion. All right, guys, are you aware of the two ways that we can deal with this?
Yeah.
Have I asked? What are the two ways we can deal with it and why? He's at the shops checking up me. Well, please God, something goes in. All right. So what's the case under discussion? If you want to say, guys, it's a case where the robber gave the asham to Yohayarev during the watch of Yohayarev, then gave the money to Yedaya during the week of Yedaya, then why does Rabbi Yehuda rule that Yedaya must release the money to Yohayarev? Because if you're looking at it at first, it should be that each respective mishmar has required that which is theirs, and we should leave it standing as it be. Okay, so according to the sage's position, that Yohayarev must relinquish the asham to Yedaya, it's plausible. Why? Why is it plausible, guys?
Which one? What does he have, Yesharam?
All right. So firstly, I want to ask Gavin a
the
question.
asham.
No,
Just
let
tell
me
me
ask,
which one that refers.
No. So let me ask Gavin a question. You've got two mishmas. You've got Yehoyarev and Yedaya. Who serves first?
What do you mean who serves first?
They're two different mishma families. Who serves first?
I don't know from the names. I don't know. One of them serves first.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm stretching you, but you should know. So there's
I can't do it by name.
Yohayarev serves first.
Absolutely. Okay, so just remember,
Well,
Because you mentioned him first. That's
yeah,
I
Yohayarev
can't. I'll never
serves
get the name.
before Yedaya.
because you always mention his name first. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm trying to make it as obvious as possible. So in that particular case, why should Yohayarev, Gavin, give the asham to Yedaya?
Because I would think that everything, the whole problem started with the animal being stolen. So everything should, it's kind of like if you look at if you look at Excel and you're doing like VLOOKUP, you have what's called a unique like product code identifier, like your product code, and then whatever's associated with that. So this is the same thing. Your product code, that's your primary thing, is your, what's it called? The animal. That's the principle. So everything else is associated with that, is linked to that. So your 1/5 is linked to that. Your asham offering is linked to that. So therefore, that's your primary sort of thing. That's how I would look at it. I know there's different opinions. There's guys saying the other way around. They don't say it like that, but to me that would make the most sense. I would go with that opinion.
Okay.
All your online courses and training, go. All your online training courses and Excel, go. Like it's like something that your company right now. If you can.
Yeah, I was just plugging it there because I want to get more viewers and more clients. It's not a good way to do it through religion. It was a bit of a plug.
Okay,
I don't know. It was just on my mind. I haven't slept. I'm completely overtired.
A good description, Kevin, by the way. It's very clear the way he explained it. I don't know Excel, but it's very clear the way he explained it.
I have no idea if the example was good. It was in my head and I just threw it because I can't think. I didn't sleep. So anything I could think of was VLOOKUP. It's terrible. All right. But you get the idea that that's like the primary product and everything else is ancillary. And that's what started the whole thing. And therefore, everything else is ancillary to it. That's what I would think. But the only thing is, if you look at the Asham offering, that's now consecrated, and it belongs to Hashem. And maybe that's why the other guys say it the other way around, because that's the Asham is to Hashem, so that's the more important. And therefore, the principle is just, it's something it has to. It's not a penalty in any way. It has to be paid. So maybe that's why they look at it like from that angle. I don't know. I'm just trying to work it out.
Kevin wanted to ask something.
So what? Yohayariv gives the Asham offering to Yodaya. What's it?
Okay, so let me just explain it simply.
Because maybe Yodaya had the principle, so it has to follow the principle, the Asham, in that sequence.
That's what I would think. Yeah.
Okay, so there's two transgressions that we're going to learn. So let me just roll it out, and I'll give you a very simple explanation. You don't have to worry about the names. Okay, so let's just go through the Mishnah. Let's go through the explanation of the two ways to look at it, and then it'll be very, very quick. I'll give you a very quick summary. So the Mishnah states, if the robber gave the money to the Mishma of Yohayariv, which, guys, was the Mishma that served in the week prior to Yodaya, and the Asham offering was given to the men of Yodaya, he has discharged his obligation. It's obvious why, because he paid the principal, the robber, first before he gave the Asham offering. And to answer Kevin's question yesterday, the best thing is obviously if he gives the principal and the Asham to one Mishma, then there's no confusion. But if there is going to be sequential giving because of a limitation of funds, then the principal on the return of the money for the robbery has to be given before the Asham, because you can't say you're sorry for lying falsely if the reason why you lied falsely was in order to get out of paying that which you stole. And therefore, all sorries are very good, and the Ram of Atonement is very good. But if you stole hundreds of thousands of rands worth of stuff and you just bring a Ram of Atonement to say you're sorry about the false oath, there's nothing rectified if you're doing this for a teshuvah and an atonement. So therefore, the principal has to be paid before the Asham. And if it's done in the right order, with the principal first to Yohayariv, which serves before Yodaya, and Yodaya gets the Asham, you've discharged your obligation as a robber. If, however, the order was mixed up and the Asham offering was given first to the preceding week, which is Yohayariv's Mishmar, and the principal payback was to the following week of Yodaya, there's a problem. So if the Asham is still in existence with the previous week and haven't sacrificed it, the robber doesn't have to replace another Asham offering. Okay? And if it's still in existence, the members of Yodaya shall offer it. In other words, what the Mishnah is saying is that the Asham has to follow the principle. There's two ways it could go. We either, if the Mishmas got mixed up and the principle was paid after the Asham, either the principle can join the Asham or the Asham can join the principle. But they got to be together if it was mixed up. If it was done in the sequential order, but one Mishmar week apart, there's no problem, as long as the principal is paid first. If the Asham was first, but it hadn't been sacrificed, it must join the principal according to our Mishnah. And we're going to see whose opinion the Mishnah accords with. Does it accord with the sages of Rabbi Yehuda? That's what we don't know, as to the logic of which follows which. Okay,
Kevin and I also had that opinion. We were on that side.
I hear you. So let me just tell you what the rabbis taught in a brisa, and I'm going to give you both sides of the argument, and it's all food for thought and food for the soul. If the robber gave the Asham to the Mishma of Yohayariv, these tongue twisters are driving me crazy. Yohayariv, and the money for restitution to the Mishma of Yodaya, the money reverts to the place where the Asham is. So now we've got two different opinions. The Mishnah, the Mishmar, I need a holiday. Because I'm mixing up the word Mishnah and Mishmar. Okay, let me take a breath. You've got to keep your sense of humor. So the Mishnah says that the men of the Mishmar, okay, the asham must follow the principle if it's still intact. The brisa, which the rabbis taught, have said that the principle must follow the asham. So we've got two opposite orders, and we want to find out how to reconcile them and who has which opinion. So, according to the rabbis in the brisa, if the robber gave the asham to the mishma of Yohayariv and the money for restitution to the mishma of Yedaya, the money reverts to the place where the asham is. So Yedaya must release the money to Yohayariv. So those are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda, guys, notes what? He notes that the principle must follow the asham in this particular brisa. In this particular brisa, we find he has an opinion that might differ later on, but in this particular brisa, he says the principle for restitution must follow the asham if it's still intact. The sages say the asham must revert to the place where the money is, the principle. So your hayariv must release it to Yedaya. You got that, guys?
Yeah.
Arthur, can you repeat the Rabbi Yehuda and the sage's opinion of what follows what?
Not a chance. Not a chance. I can't even repeat what I did today, so.
Okay, well, at least there's reward in Shemaim for attending. That's some consolation.
Well, at least it is a consolation prize. Better than nothing.
Okay. So, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Gavin, what's the answer?
Oh gosh, now I forgot. I'm going blank. Sorry, I didn't sleep, but I do know the answer. Just give me a second. So Rabbi,
one of those days.
no, I'm blank, but I do know the answer. I'm listening to you. I just can't remember like things that happened 2 seconds ago. So Rabbi Yehuda says that.
Damon, I'm up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I got up at 5:30. I've just got home now. Finished my class.
I get it, no problem. Gavin's just at the bottom of the
I've been working all day.
That's no problem. Not a problem.
So Rabbi Yehuda says that the principle that the principle follows the asham, and the sages say that the asham follows the principle. So they actually got the names right as well.
Okay, so that's the money reverts to the place where the asham is. The principle follows the asham according to Rabbi Yehuda. That's correct. And according to the sages, the asham reverts to the place where the money is. Okay. So the Gemara asks, what's the case under discussion? If you want to say it's a case where the robber gave the asham to Yohayariv during the watch of Yohayariv, and then gave the money to Yedaya during the watch of Yedaya, then why does Rabbi Yehuda rule that Yedaya must release the money to Yohayariv? Let each mishmar keep what is his. Okay. Now there are. We're gonna explain what the case of it is, and you'll see the other way of looking at it now. So the Gemara explains the Brisa's case. According to Rava, we're dealing with the case where the robber gave the asham to Yohayariv during the week of Yohayariv's watch, and he gave the money to Yedaya during the week of Yohayariv's watch. So what happened is now we've got a double problem, because both mishmarot acted improperly. Yohayariv should not have accepted the asham before restitution was made, and Yedaya should not have accepted the principal restitution during Yohayariv's watch. You see how they both erred?
Yeah.
So Rabbi Yehuda holds that since it's not the week of Yedaya's watch, and Yedaya accepted the payment improperly, we penalize Yedaya, and they say the principal has to follow the asham, because they don't get to keep the principal, because they accepted it in a week that was not theirs. So therefore, the money reverts to the place where the asham is. Yedaya must release the money to Yohayariv. But the rabbis hold that the members of Yohayariv acted improperly in accepting the asham before receiving the restitution money. Therefore, we penalize them, and the asham reverts to the place where the money is. Your Yarev must release the offering to Yediah. So, in other words, guys, the dispute can be explained as follows. Rabbi Yehuda favors penalizing the mishmar that took something which by right should have gone to another mishmar. That's his focus. So since Yediah had no justification for accepting a payment during Yohayariv's watch, it's got to release the money to Yohayariv. The rabbis have got to focus where they penalize the mishmar that was derelict in its temple duties, because Yohayariv should never have accepted the asham before checking with the robber if he did paid the principal and still owed the restitution. So they are penalized because they must release it to Yediah. Now, the one thing that you've got to realize is this dispute where we're focusing on where the rabbi's emphasis is compared to Rabbi Yehuda applies only in a case where Yediah accepted payment during Yohayariv's watch. Yeah, Rav Yehuda actually does agree with the rabbis that if the robber waited until the following week and gave Yediah the money during its watch for the restitution, we would let Yediah keep it, and we would actually penalize Yehoyariv for accepting the ashram before restitution was made, because that was the only infraction. So Rabbi Yehuda has only got a different emphasis when the infraction is on which mishmar took it from the other, whereas the rabbis say that the infraction is accepting the ashram before the principal has been paid and restitution has been made. But in a case where each watch accepted it during their particular watch, then there's certainly not a problem. In other words, if the principal was accepted during the watch of Yohayariv, and it was Yohayariv's watch, and you didn't give it to men that belonged to a different mishmar during the wrong watch, then in that case, the asham has to follow the principal because they were derelict in accepting the asham. So wherever is cleanest, that's where the money goes. So the Gemara cites a brisa, and it wants to qualify Rabbi Yehuda's position. According to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, if the members of Yohayariv went ahead and offered the asham during their watch, the robber must repeat and bring another asham offering. Okay? Because if the asham is offered before restitution, it's disqualified. Now, Gavin brought up a good point. He said it's kind of not fair, because the guy's a robber, he might be ignorant. And then Gavin answered it with this lookup issue, and said that basically the thing is a vicious cycle, meaning if the robber never had stolen, if he never lied, he would never be in this mess to start with. So at the end of the day, this stupidity started and ended with him. However, we don't know if men of the Mishmar would come to the party and pay harveys because they were also derelict, or they wouldn't pay anything, or they'd end up paying for it him in full with the money of the ram. We're not sure. It implies so far that the robber has to bring it at his cost. It doesn't say that the men of the Mishmar are picking it up. So it was taught in a brisa that Rebbe said, according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, if the members of the Yohayariv went ahead and offered the asham during their watch, the robber's going to repeat and bring another asham offering. And this time, the members of Yediah shall offer it. And the reason being is there's no reason that when the second offering is made, it's going to be given to the wrong mishmar, because Yohayariv already benefited through their negligence. So Yediah is entitled to the second asham because they in fact have the principal, and Yohayariv was derelict in their duties. So Yediah acquires, but so this is the weird part. Although he ruled that we penalize Yediah and force it to release the money to Yohayariv, and basically Yohayariv acquires both the asham and the money, it only applies when the asham is still in existence, and Yohayariv will have the opportunity to offer it properly. In other words, after receiving the payment, they could have offered it properly during its own watch. If, however, Yohayariv offered the asham improperly before receiving restitution, then that offering is given to Yediah. Now, there are two different opinions here. Okay, so Rashi implies that the asham is disqualified because Yehoyariv offered it before receiving the payment, even though the robber had given the payment to Yediah by that time. But the thing of it is, it was still offered first, since the payment hasn't been received by the mishmar to whom it is due. So the problem is that Yediah accepted it during Yehoyariv's watch. That's according to Rashi's opinion of Rav Yehuda. And then there is a different opinion where Yehoyariv offered the asham even before Yediah received the money. So now what we're going to learn is that the members of Yehoyariv have acquired that which is in their hands. In other words, we're saying, hang on, since they offered the asham, how come they get to benefit? Because it seems to say the statement that they acquired what is in their hands, because if they offered the first asham properly, they receive the Kohanic portion. Now, guys, does that seem right? No, because you're incentivizing the mishmar to make mistakes. Because if the Kohanim get to keep the benefits of the animal, are they likely to make the mistake again? Yes, and on purpose. Or even if not on purpose, if they get rewarded for their mistakes and the robber is the only one getting punished, that's not fair. So at the very least, the Kohanim of the mishmar shouldn't be allowed to partake of that particular asham sacrifice, since it was inappropriate and it caused the robber to bring another ram of atonement for the asham. So the Gemara wonders about how they could get any sort of benefit, because they're saying if it's an invalid offering to where the robber has to bring another offering, how's the asham fit to where the Kohanim can eat it? And Rava said it's fit only for the hides to be used. In other words, although the meat of the disqualified offering cannot be eaten by the Kohanim and it has to be burnt, the hide is permitted for benefit, and the Kohanim of the mishmar may keep the hide. Not everybody agrees with that opinion, and it's difficult to understand how they get to keep the hide, because they're certainly getting some sort of a benefit from making the mistake. But obviously Rava is saying for sure that the meat cannot be used, because a Kohen cannot have an invalid offering and partake of the meat. He's only allowed to do it as part of his Kohanic service, that he gets to share the benefits endorsed by the Most High, but it has to be a valid offering. So a related brisa is taught. Rebbe said, according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, if the asham is still in existence and Yehoyariv did not offer it, the asham reverts to the place where the money is, because Yehoyariv must release the offering to Yediah. Okay. Now, there's a problem here, because if this was taught, as Rebbe said, it's seeming to be an exact opposite of what Rabbi Yehuda said before. Because remember, Rav Yehuda said in a brisa before that the money reverts to the place where the asham is, which is the opposite of what Rebbe stated here. Why did he say that before? Because he was saying that the men of Yehoyariv accepted the asham before the principal had been paid, and that wasn't a problem for him. It was a problem that Yediah accepted the principal when it was still Yehoyariv's watch, because if Yehoyariv had the principal and the offering was done of the asham at the same time, it would all go to the right mishmar. So he's saying that the wrong mishmar accepted the principal if the other mishmar was still on duty. So that's what we learned in the previous brisa. Now in this brisa, it's saying that the asham has to go where the money is. In other words, we're punishing Yehoyariv for accepting the asham prematurely before the principal made restitution, which seems to be in agreement with the rabbis. So the Gemara is saying, well, these seem to be two contradictions. It's that according to Rebbe, it seems to go with the opinion of the rabbis, and according to the previous brisa, Rav Yehuda says the mishmar that accepted an offering not in its watch should be the key focus. So the Gemara says, well, what are we dealing with here? So it's a case where the week of your Hayariv's watch concluded and your Hayarev did not demand the money of Yedaya. So what that is basically saying is that if they didn't actually take up this issue with the men of the Mishmar to follow, then they don't have a claim. So we're dealing with a case where the robber gave the asham to your Hayarev and the money to Yadai during your Hayarev's watch. But your Hayarev, as the Gemara says, let the week pass without demanding the money. Okay? Now, Rebbe informs us that there's a particular novel point here. It's not automatic that restitution is made by either party. So if the men of your Hayarev didn't demand restitution during their week from the men of Yedaya, then Yedaya may keep the money and then it also receives the asham offering. Okay, because if your Hayarev didn't complain that Yedaya took it during your Hayarev's watch, then Yedaya can get to keep it. But then we're saying that why do they get to keep the asham? Because it would seem that that when the one mishmar didn't take exception to the other, not only do they lose the right that they could have demanded, but they even lose their own rights. So when Rabbi Yehuda ruled that the money reverts to your Hayarev, he didn't mean that Yedai must relinquish it in any event. But your Hayarev has to push in a claim, and they have the right to extract it from Yedaya. But if the men of your Hayarev did not bother to demand it during the week, they've waived this right. It has to be within that week while they're still on duty and not afterwards. And since the money now justly belongs to Yedaya, since there was no complaints, the men of your Hayarev aren't entitled to keep the asham because they wrongly accepted it while the robber still owed restitution. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda agrees that the asham then would have to revert. If there was no complaint that the men of the Mishmar took in the wrong week, the only complaint would be left is, well, why was the asham taken prematurely? So that would follow. So it was related in another brisa that Rebbe said, according to Rabbi Yehuda, if the asham is still in existence, the money reverts to the place where the asham is. In other words, Yadai must release it to your Hayarev. Okay, so we're saying that if the asham is not in existence, we know what to do with it. But if it's still in existence, the principle must follow the asham. So the Gemara says, well, that's obvious. Why mention the obvious? Because we know that Rabbi Yehuda held like that in the first brisa. So what is Rebbe inform us of this for? And the Gemara says, well, what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with a case where the watches of both of these men of the Mishmar, of both the men of your Hayarev and the men of Yedai are concluded, and they each did their weekly watch, and neither of them demanded anything of the other. So you might say that they both waived their right to each other, and accordingly, your Hayarev can keep the asham, and Yedaya can keep the principal, because neither had a claim against the other. And Rebbe informs us that it just doesn't sit where it is. That even that because Yehoyarev said that Yedaya didn't bring up an issue where they were out of turn in accepting the principle for their mishmar, then what we do is we have to revert back to the original rule in that Yedaya must release the money to your Hayarev. Okay, according to Rebbe. Okay, in other words, the failure of each mishmar to enforce its right during the week doesn't make both mishmarot entitled to keep that which they receive. So the law goes back into effect with the Yedaya penalized and forced to relinquish the money that it accepted during your Hayarev's watch, according to Rabbi Yehuda. So your Hayarev receives the money in addition to the asham because it accepted it initially, but it has to hold it for a 24-week cycle before it can give both the principal and the asham. So whenever a mishmar acted improperly, the sages imposed a penalty and ordered the injustice rectified. So it then has to release the money to the mishmar that received the asham, or vice versa. Whoever committed the felony of either accepting it in the wrong order or the mishmar went out of turn in accepting a sacrifice. So Yochai Yariv wrongly accepted the Asham before restitution, and yet Yedaya accepted restitution during Yochai Yariv's watch. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, that we initially penalized Yedaya to release the money to Yochai Yariv, because the most important thing, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is that a mishmar can't go out of its term. It's not the order in which the sacrifice is made. But if Yochai Yariv doesn't enforce the law, it's not only waived its right to get the principal back to it, but it's waived the right to get the asham. So now Yochai Yariv, accordingly to Rabbi Yehuda, must release the asham, as well as the principal must stick with Yedaya. So the moral of the story is, if you've got your rights, you better enforce it. Okay, cool, guys. That's it. And the sages still hold that where the asham was offered prematurely, that has to go to where the principal lies. It's done.
At the robber's expense.
No, well, we're saying if the asham hasn't been sacrificed yet and everything.
Ah, yes. So, but it's still the robber's prejudiced. If it was sacrificed incorrectly before the principal was paid,
yeah,
then he'd say he has no choice. He's got no. He has to.
But you must know that
provide a second asham offering.
Yeah, Hashem's testing him in that regard to see if he truly has the resolve for atonement, and there's divine intervention there. Although I'd like to know if the men of the Mishmar have any sort of responsibility there, apart from not partaking of the benefit. Do they have to pay for the ram of atonement? Do they go halvies? What happens?
So there's actually get lashes.
Gavin, you could say, Gavin, if there's a ram, it should be, there's a lot at stake if it's going to be offered, Gavin.
Yes,
STEAK.
I'm a bit worried about if we're switching religions.
Why don't they make it simple? Like our favorite guy, it says, if you give me the money, you're never going to get it back.
Ferengi.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love that. That'll be a solution. Once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, it's true. One has to be careful. Guys, I know you're all exhausted. Have a good night. You know what? I'm telling you, I was tongue-tied between the word Mishnah and Mishmar. I can't tell you how tongue-tied I've been.
Well, it's not that.
Simcha Shir tomorrow night, Damon.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, but